The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as I approached Mrs. Hampton's stately manor. Scruffy, my loyal golden retriever, trotted happily beside me, his tail wagging with anticipation. Our daily visits had become a cherished ritual, a comforting constant in our lives. Mrs. Hampton, a kind-hearted widow, always welcomed us with open arms and a warm smile. Scruffy adored her freshly baked treats, and I cherished our conversations, filled with laughter and shared stories. As we approached the grand oak door, I noticed an unusual silence. The house seemed strangely still, a stark contrast to its usual warmth and vibrancy. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Scruffy whined softly, sensing my growing apprehension. I tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to my overactive imagination. After all, Mrs. Hampton was a creature of habit, her days as predictable as the sunrise. We reached the door, and I raised my hand to knock. Before my knuckles could connect with the polished wood, a chilling thought stopped me cold. What if something was wrong? What if my intuition wasn't playing tricks on me? Fear, sharp and cold, washed over me. My last encounter with Edith, Mrs. Hampton's housekeeper, had been far from pleasant. We'd had a disagreement, a silly misunderstanding that escalated into a heated argument. Harsh words had been exchanged, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. I'd stormed off, my pride wounded, vowing to never return. Now, as I stood on Mrs. Hampton's doorstep, a wave of guilt washed over me. Had I been too harsh with Edith? Had my anger blinded me to her perspective? I recalled her tired eyes, her weary voice, and a pang of remorse shot through me. She worked tirelessly, caring for Mrs. Hampton with unwavering dedication. The silence from within the house pressed against me, amplifying my guilt. I had let a petty squabble overshadow my concern for Mrs. Hampton. Shame washed over me, heavy and suffocating. I had to make things right. Determined to apologize to Edith and check on Mrs. Hampton, I pushed open the heavy oak door. A musty, stale smell hit me, unfamiliar and unsettling. The air hung thick with silence, broken only by the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Mrs. Hampton?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "Edith, it's me. Your name?" There was no answer. The silence stretched, becoming more ominous with each passing second. Scruffy whined again, this time nudging my hand with his wet nose. His uneasiness mirrored my own. Something was definitely wrong. With each step deeper into the house, the weight of dread grew heavier. I called out again, my voice echoing through the empty halls. The lack of response sent a shiver down my spine. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat urging me to turn back, but I couldn't. Not until I knew Mrs. Hampton and Edith were safe. The living room was shrouded in an unnatural stillness. Dust motes danced in the faint afternoon light filtering through the drawn curtains. A sense of wrongness permeated the air, raising goosebumps on my arms. Scruffy whimpered, pressing close to my leg. He too sensed the unsettling atmosphere. His usually playful demeanour had vanished, replaced by a whimpering anxiety. Following a strange, macabre instinct, I moved towards the overturned armchair. A chill ran down my spine, for lying amidst the scattered cushions, pale and lifeless, was a hand. Not just any hand, but a hand I recognized. Edith's hand. Her fingers, usually so nimble and quick, were frozen in a grotesque curl. Panic surged through me, choking the air from my lungs. The sight of Edith's hand, severed at the wrist, sent a jolt of pure terror through me. The casual normalcy of our daily ritual, the comforting predictability of Mrs. Hampton's routine, shattered into a million pieces. The world lurched around me, the familiar transformed into the horrifyingly unknown. This wasn't just an accident, it was something far more sinister.